It begins with the hush of pre-dawn fog, thick, rolling like cream poured too slowly across the landscape. You're not quite yourself yet. That's all right. You're slipping into something older, slower. Your footsteps echo gently on the stone. Somewhere nearby, a wooden cart creaks, pulled by a mule that's seen more sunrises than it strictly asked for. You're in Sumer. Yes, that's Sumer, southern Mesopotamia. Around 3100 BCE, sand-colored walls rise like weary shoulders from the earth, and reeds cluster around the riverbank, whispering secrets to the wind. The scent in the air is part fresh barley, part wet clay, and part something more elusive, probably goat. You probably won't make it through this day, which is fine. That's sort of the point. If you're enjoying this walk through time, consider giving a sleepy little like or subscribing for more. It helps keep the fires lit. Well, the metaphorical ones. Comment your location and local time below. Are you in Berlin at 3 a.m., wondering why you still haven't learned what a technocracy is? Or in Tokyo at midnight, considering whether monarchy sounds kind of peaceful? Now let's ease into tonight's journey. The man you're following, slowly, carefully, so as not to arouse suspicion, is Enlil Bani. He's neither a priest nor a god, though Sumerians tend to blur those lines with all the elegance of a toddler with paint. Enlil Bani is the king of Isin, a smallish city-state with a largish ego, and he holds his title by divine appointment, supposedly. This is monarchy at its squishy, ceremonial infancy. Here, kings don't just rule. They shepherd people, a charming euphemism that sounds gentler than dictator, but still involves taxes, temples, and the occasional human sacrifice, which we will not be discussing in detail, because you're trying to sleep. Historical fact, the Sumerians invented the concept of kingship, but they believed it descended from the Bods, like a particularly confusing lease agreement. You don't own the throne, you just borrow it until the gods revoke your parking privileges. You notice Enlil Bani gesturing toward a ziggurat. He looks calm, like someone whose main diplomatic tool is, "I'll consult the gods." You wonder how it must feel to rule by divine mandate, to sit on a throne while priests interpret bird entrails and call it policy. And then, somewhere off to your right, a merchant yells about fish, loudly. A reminder that even under sacred monarchy, you still have to haggle over tilapia. The light shifts slowly, amber to gold, casting long shadows. You feel time dripping like honey, thick, slow, inevitable. You wonder, was Enlil Bani a real king, a fraud, or simply a gardener with great posture? But your thoughts are melting like candle wax, and you follow him anyway, deeper into the city of mud brick and god breath. He doesn't look back. Monarchs rarely do, and Lil Bani is actually a bit of a fluke. According to a muddled tablet, he began as a gardener, then somehow, temporarily, sat on the throne for another king, and never quite gave it back. Historians still debate whether he was a cunning opportunist or just forgot to stand up. Either way, he ruled for 24 years. Not bad for a guy who used to prune fig trees. Obscure tidbit, the king's meals were so heavily ritualized that if the royal chef sneezed during preparation, the food had to be buried, not eaten. Truly, nothing says divine power like a compost heap of barley cakes. As you drift with the scent of incense into the temple courtyard, you pass scribes, hunched over wax tablets, writing things you'll never read, in a language shaped like tiny chicken footprints. They're recording laws, mostly, laws that no one really remembers, but that definitely have something to do with oxen, clay pots, and marital expectations. The clay beneath your sandals cracks softly as you cross into another century. Just a few hundred years forward, no big deal. Time is pliable here, and your joints, thankfully, are not involved. Now you're in ancient Egypt, sometime around 1450 BCE. The Nile slinks by like a lazy green cat, and the sky is cloudless, as if the gods are saving paper. You hear the rhythmic thump of a drum, ceremonial, not threatening. Hopefully, the air is warm and buttery, with the scent of honey, papyrus, and that mysterious smell all linen seems to have before laundry was invented. This is the height of the new kingdom. Pharaohs strut like literal gods on earth, and the government is as streamlined as a stone can be when bureaucracy runs on sandals and sunburn. Today's monarch? Hatshepsut. That's right, a woman, in a patriarchal theocracy. Somewhere, a scribe is quietly panicking. Hatshepsut's court is bustling. Viziers glide about with scrolls. Priests perform rituals that make Catholic Mass look like open mic night. Somewhere, a child tries to steal a pomegranate and is immediately foiled by a goat. Justice is swift and slightly ridiculous. You sit on a low bench near the temple garden. The air is heavy with lotus. A servant pours you barley beer into a ceramic cup that frankly smells like it's been through things. It's surprisingly refreshing. You begin to suspect that ancient governance relied heavily on beer and religious anxiety, and that's monarchy here. A divine right so absolute, so layered with ceremony and ideology, that questioning it feels like arguing with the weather. The pharaoh isn't just a king. They're the fulcrum of the universe. No pressure, but still, whispers rustle like reeds. Some priests are thrilled about a woman ruling as pharaoh. Others are too afraid to say otherwise. And when Hatshepsut dies, her stepson goes to town, chiseling her name off monuments like a jealous Instagram ex. Historians still debate whether that was political revenge, theological course correction, or just plain pettiness. Probably yes, to all three. The sun begins to set. Not dramatically, Egypt doesn't do drama, just a slow, molten slide behind palm trees and limestone. You watch shadows stretch long and regal, like servants offering shade to a god. And as the stars appear, faint and flickering, you feel the weight of the system around you. Monarchy as a performance, a religion, a trap, a crown. You let it wrap around your mind like linen. You lie back on the worn stone and let your eyes slip shut. The drums continue in the distance. Sleep might come soon, but not yet. Historical fact. Hatshepsut ruled as pharaoh for over 20 years, even wearing the traditional false beard and being referred to in inscriptions as His Majesty. The Egyptians valued tradition over biology, which is deeply ironic, given that their most famous exports are pyramids and mummies. You walk past enormous statues, Hatshepsut's face carved over and over again, confident and serene, like someone who knows how to file taxes and call down divine wrath. Her mortuary temple clings to the cliffs at Deir el-Bahri, a place so architecturally graceful that even modern scholars have to admit it kind of slaps. Obscure tidbit. Ancient Egyptians believed the heart, not the brain, was the seat of intelligence. Brains were removed and tossed during mummification, so if you ever feel like you're thinking with your heart, congratulations, you're historically accurate. You wake to the sound of marching feet. Not many, just enough to suggest order, not invasion. The sky has lightened to a pale, almost bashful blue, and a soft morning wind lifts the edge of your tunic. You're in Athens now, classical Athens, somewhere between 508 and 322 BCE, give or take a few experimental hairstyles. Gone are the ziggurats and god kings. Here, the buildings are marble, the people loud, and the government complicated. Welcome to democracy. Sort of. You walk past a cluster of citizens gathered near the Pnyx Hill. They're arguing. Of course they are. One of them is waving his arms so furiously that he knocks over a basket of olives. No one stops. The olives roll down the steps, like democracy itself, full of potential, but absolutely going to get stepped on. You sip watered-down wine and try not to make eye contact. Debate here isn't polite. It's performance art with existential stakes. They take turns speaking from the bema, a stone platform, each pretending not to be terrified of being booed off it. You kind of admired them. And here's the twist. These citizens are genuinely invested. The city is their business. There are no kings, no divine mandates, no fancy hats. Just public opinion, peer pressure, and the constant possibility of being yelled at in public by a guy named Cleon. But still, the system is fragile. You hear whispers about demagogues, charismatic loudmouths who stir fear to gain power. You squint. One of them might be running for office right now. His tunic is too clean. Suspicious. Historians still debate whether Athenian democracy was revolutionary or just a noble facade. After all, it collapsed more than once, like a well-meaning lasagna. The sky brightens. Someone plays a liar badly. Pigeons coo like they've got opinions too. Democracy, in its messy, beautiful form, breathes around you. Talkative, unwashed, optimistic. You lean back against the tree. The bark is rough, but real, just like Athens. You blink again, and now it's quiet. The kind of quiet that has weight to it. Cloaks rustle. Swords click softly against armor. You are in the Roman Republic. It's around 130 BCE, and you're standing near the Forum, watching a man in a pristine toga look absolutely exhausted by life. His name is Gaius Gracchus. His brother was murdered for trying to help poor people, and now Gaius is giving it a go, with more flair, fewer illusions, and approximately the same life expectancy. This is a republic, a system where power is shared between elected officials, senatorial elites, and a staggering amount of yelling. Checks and balances? Absolutely. If by checks you mean bribes, and by balances you mean civil unrest. Historical fact. The Roman Republic had consuls, tribunes, senators, and assemblies. It was a brilliant mix of monarchy, consuls, aristocracy, senate, and democracy, popular assemblies. Basically, everyone had power and no one had a good time. Obscure tidbit. Romans believed in mos maiorum, or the customs of the ancestors. So if you wanted to pass a law, you had to pretend it was totally something your grandpa would have approved of, even if your grandpa had never heard of it. Imagine trying to legalize electric scooters by quoting Cicero. You follow Gaius as he walks through the Forum. Merchants call out. Children chase each other around columns. A man with suspiciously white teeth is almost certainly selling fraudulent fish sauce. Gaius mounts the rostra. He's not tall, but his voice carries like a prayer. He speaks of justice, of land for the poor, of wheat subsidies, of dignity. He speaks like someone who knows his time is short. You notice the senators watching from the steps, stoic and humanly still. Their expressions flicker between boredom, disdain, and mild panic. A few make notes. One seems to be drawing a horse, and still the people cheer. Because Gaius, flawed and earnest, sounds like hope. His reforms make sense to the poor, and an existential threat to the rich. You glance around. Somewhere, something is already being plotted. Historians still debate whether the Gracchi brothers were democratic heroes or destabilizing radicals. Again, probably yes to both. You buy a honey cake from a nearby vendor who tells you, unprompted, that everything's going to collapse eventually. He says it cheerfully. Romans do that. As Gaius finishes his speech, a pigeon poops on a senator's sandal. A small victory, but a meaningful one. You step back into the shade of a column, the cake still warm in your hand. The Roman Republic pulses with life, but something in the air feels brittle. You inhale deeply. Smells like bread and revolution. You close your eyes and let the sound of sandals on marble lull you into a softer place. Historical fact: Athens developed the first known direct democracy, where free male citizens, about 10% of the population, could vote on laws. Which sounds great until you realize that excludes women, slaves, foreigners, and anyone with a full-time job. You pass a man scribbling his name on a potsherd, an ostracon. He's voting to exile someone. That's right. In Athens, you can vote your political enemies out of town once a year. It's petty. It's democratic. It's basically high school with togas. Obscure tidbit: citizens would sometimes vote to exile someone just because they were too popular. Being too liked was suspicious. So if you've ever felt weird about being the favored at work, you're in ancient Greek company. You sit under an olive tree and eavesdrop because everyone does. One man is advocating for a new road to the agora. Another is yelling about taxes on fish. A third demands military expansion because someone from Corinth looked at him funny. It's colder now. The ground is damp and you can hear the low clatter of hooves in the fog. Somewhere in the distance, a raven coughs dramatically, possibly for attention. You are in early medieval England. The year? Let's say 871. It's not exact, but neither were most of the maps. You wrap your cloak tighter, because this is the age of feudalism, and warm clothing is not included in your social rank. Welcome to monarchy. Version 2.0, complete with vassals, oaths, and the ever-present threat of being mildly stabbed over barley taxes. Your guide for today: Alfred, later to be called Alfred the Great. But right now, he's just a tired, clever man trying to unify the various kingdoms that keep misplacing their borders. He looks like he hasn't slept in days. You relate. Historical fact: Alfred is credited with being the first king of the Anglo-Saxons, and he promoted education and legal reform while fending off Viking invasions, with approximately zero budget and endless determination. A king's power here is conditional. He grants land to nobles in exchange for military service, like a slightly violent pyramid scheme. Those nobles, in turn, have peasants who work the land in exchange for protection and the occasional festival involving questionable pies. You notice a peasant boy staring at Alfred like he's a walking legend. The king kneels slightly to ask him something, probably about a local field. The boy mumbles. Alfred nods solemnly. Historians still debate whether Alfred's reforms were revolutionary or just well-organized survival strategies. But there's a reason they kept his name, and not, say, Ethelred's. As you step back out into the chill, a sharp wind cuts across the moors. The sky is heavy with cloud, the kind that never really commits to rain. You adjust your pace to avoid a cart full of turnips and contemplate the delicate lattice of loyalty and grain taxes that props up this whole world. Somewhere, a bard begins a half-tuneless song about a local lord's goat. Everyone pretends not to listen, but they're definitely listening. Feudal monarchy. It's not glorious, but it works. Kind of. Unless you're at the bottom, which, statistically, you are. You pull your cloak closer and head toward the firelight. Sleep tugs at the corners of your eyes like a page boy with something to confess. Section 6. It's warmer now. Not by much, but the kind of warmth that suggests stone buildings, expensive fires, and meals with more than one spice. You're in France, mid-1600s, Versailles, a monument to opulence, ambition, and highly flammable wigs. Welcome to Absolutism, the monarchy rebranded as a one-man stage play where the king is the playwright, actor, and audience all at once. You walk quietly down the hall of mirrors, trying not to scuff the floor. Your reflection flickers alongside you in gold and glass. It's early morning, and the sun is just beginning to burn through the mist. Chandeliers twitch like sleepy insects. Historical fact: King Louis XIV ruled France for 72 years, declaring himself the Sun King. He centralized power to such an extent that nobility were required to live at Versailles under constant observation. Political strategy by way of very elaborate breakfast rituals. You spot him ahead. Louis, not the sun, wearing red heels, heavy lace, and a velvet coat that could upholster an entire fainting room. He glances your way, but doesn't see you. You're not important enough. Almost no one is. You follow him through the palace, past courtiers who bow with just enough enthusiasm to seem loyal, but not enough to break a sweat. It's all about appearances here, and proximity to power. Obscure tidbit: courtiers at Versailles competed for the honor of handing the king his shirt during the morning dressing ceremony. Not even the crown, just the shirt. Prestige came in layers, like a very passive-aggressive onion. Louis stops to inspect a tapestry. He mutters something about symmetry. A minister nods furiously, perhaps unsure if this is a metaphor for tax policy. This is monarchy as theater. There are no more oaths of loyalty in muddy fields. Here, control flows from the king's presence. If you're not in the room, you're not in the game. But it's fragile. Everything here looks strong, but you can feel the tension behind it. The hunger, the cost, the grinding machinery of 1,000 minor betrayals. Historians still debate whether absolutism was efficient government or narcissistic pageantry with taxation. Both. Definitely both. You step outside to the gardens, which are so geometrically perfect that they make your brain itch. Fountains gurgle like aristocratic stomachs, and birds sing in a highly choreographed key. You find a marble bench and sit down. Your feet ache from all the protocol. Even imaginary courtly life is exhausting. And you wonder, does Louis sleep well at night? Or does he lie awake, wondering which cousin might try to poison his custard? The sky is blue, in that royal, unreasonable way. You lean back. You close your eyes, and Versailles hums quietly behind you. A palace made of mirrors and masks. You trail behind Alfred's small retinue as they approach a wooden long hall. It smells like smoke, mutton, and at least 3 different kinds of sweat. Inside, a thane is trying to explain land disputes with the energy of someone who knows this entire conversation ends with the sheep being exchanged. Obscure tidbit: in feudal contracts, vassals often performed a ritual called homage, kneeling and placing their hands between the lord's hands, like a medieval promposal. If the lord accepted, he had to feed and protect you, assuming he remembered your name. Alfred listens carefully. He's good at that. He knows his power doesn't rest in divine mandate alone. It rests on loyalty, strategy, and making sure your neighbors don't burn your village down while you're attending a moot. The scent of smoke follows you now, not from fire, but from coal. It hangs in the air like a permanent thought. You open your eyes to find yourself in London, and it is 1848. The cobblestones are damp, the sky a gray so consistent it might be a factory product, and everyone looks like they haven't quite recovered from breakfast. This is the age of constitutional monarchy, and Queen Victoria is somewhere nearby, probably not smiling. No one is, really. You walk past a group of men in long coats, muttering about Parliament. One of them gestures with a rolled-up newspaper, like he's trying to summon legislation. You keep walking. A child offers to sell you a tooth. You politely decline. Historical fact. By the mid-19th century, Britain had shifted to a constitutional monarchy, where the monarch reigned but didn't rule. Real power lay with Parliament, prime ministers, and a deeply complicated system of traditions no one wanted to admit they didn't fully understand. You cross Westminster Bridge, boots tapping steadily as the fog curls around the Thames. Big Ben hasn't chimed yet. It's oddly comforting, like the city's still deciding whether to wake up or go back to bed. Obscure tidbit. Queen Victoria's morning routine included being read to from the Bible, while her hair was arranged into carefully structured doom curls. A fine metaphor for British governance, if ever there was one. You arrive near the Houses of Parliament, just as a heated debate is underway, by which we mean several men are shouting, while a third writes it all down in beautiful cursive. This is government by representation, debate, and tea. Lots of tea. Constitutional monarchy is the halfway house between divine right and democracy. The monarch still exists, majestic, symbolic, occasionally bewildered. But real authority flows through elected officials, bureaucratic channels, and whatever the newspapers are yelling about this week. Queen Victoria doesn't make laws, but she opens Parliament with great fanfare. She gives speeches written by someone else, rides in a golden coach, and looks very stern about the whole thing. As figureheads go, she's carved from iron and childhood trauma. Historians still debate whether Victoria had much influence behind the scenes, or simply became a comforting, grumpy national mascot. Either way, she wore black for 40 years and the empire did not collapse. So, you sit on a wrought iron bench by the river. A man nearby is arguing